Hey, while you're watching this video, take a shot every time I say elements. I dare you. Hey gang, it's Squill, and Season 9 of Adventure Time is a weird season to talk about. In fact, I actually put this retrospective off a little bit, partially because I wasn't sure how I wanted to talk about this season, but also partially because I've been so busy with school stuff. Not only is it the shortest season of the show at only 14 episodes, but just a little over half of those episodes are taken up by the Elements miniseries, meaning that Season 9 only has 6 normal episodes of Adventure Time. And even of those 6 episodes, 5 of them are related to Elements in some way, shape, or form. Basically, Season 9 is just Elements the season. So because of that, this retrospective is gonna be a little different from the other seasons. Unlike the previous two, where I talked about the seasons as a whole for a little bit and then talked about their respective miniseries, here I'm going to talk about Elements first, and then discuss the episodes surrounding it. This makes the most amount of sense given how much of the season is taken up by Elements, so let's get into it. Elements is the third and final Adventure Time miniseries, but more importantly, it also happens to be my favorite of the 3. I absolutely adore these episodes for so many reasons, and I'm so excited to get into them. First off, not counting Distant Lands, I think Elements is the best Adventure Time has ever looked. Seriously, the backgrounds here are just gorgeous. You can just tell that so much work was put into crafting these element kingdoms. I also love the designs given to the elementified versions of the characters. I'm a big fan of getting to see alternate versions of characters we're familiar with, so this obviously appeals to me. I also love all the silly names they give them, like Marshmalline the Campfire Queen. That's just genius. Much like with Islands, there's a strong sense of adventure and exploration to Elements that makes it very exciting to watch. It is basically a MacGuffin quest, but that's by no means a bad thing, as it gives our characters an excuse to explore this weird, messed up version of Ooh. But what really makes Elements for me is the character dynamics and their interactions with each other. I mean, first off, Elements is just consistently very funny. There's just so many memorable little one-liners throughout these episodes that makes Elements easily the funniest of the 3 miniseries. And it doesn't have that same problem Stakes has, where a lot of the jokes drag on too long and take away a bit from the tone. The jokes in Elements are quick and snappy and never take away from the story or character drama. But speaking more about the characters themselves, I love Ice King's role in Elements. Not only does he provide some of the best jokes in the first half of the miniseries, but I also just love the Finn, Jake, and Ice King dynamic so much. It's so much fun. The fact that Finn and Jake are able to trust and actually work with the Ice King is so wholesome and feels like such great payoff for his arc. It's the sort of dynamic that they just wouldn't have been able to have in the earlier seasons, which makes Elements feel all the more special. And speaking of Ice King, I'm a big fan of Betty's role in Elements too. My biggest problem with Betty before this point was just how spread apart her episodes were. She was a compelling character, don't get me wrong, but because she only appeared once per season, it felt like we were missing parts of her story. But Elements fixes that by having her play a major role throughout most of these episodes, and giving her an actual arc. It's really tragic too. She genuinely tries to appreciate the Ice King for who he is, but she just couldn't separate the Ice King from Simon, which ultimately led her down a dark path. When I was watching Elements for the first time, I was initially kinda worried about LSP taking such a major role in the second half. LSP is a character who can be funny in short bursts, but when given a major role, she very rarely works for me. Her personality is just so loud and abrasive that it's hard for me to root for her. But man, I don't know, there's something about the way she's written in Elements that just works really well for me. She has some of the best jokes in the second half of the miniseries, and her chemistry with Finn is surprisingly great. And it also helps that she actually ends up being very important. Recontextualizing her into being the anti-elemental is such a cool reveal for her character. It retroactively makes her very important, but it doesn't feel like it came out of nowhere either, it feels right. But the real emotional core of Elements comes in the dynamic between Finn and Jake. The first half of Elements puts a lot of emphasis on Finn and Jake's bond, particularly the episode Cloudy, which is entirely dedicated to exploring their dynamic. So when the two are separated at the end of Slime Central, his lack of presence is really felt. The fact that Finn feels so lost without Jake really shows how important Jake's support is in Finn's life. This theme is very much carried into Together Again. And man, that scene at the end of Finn and Jake hugging, it gets me into feels every time. I love it. So yeah, as you guys can probably tell, I love Elements a lot. It's easily my favorite of the 3 miniseries, and it's one of my favorite things the show's done as a whole. Visually speaking, it looks amazing, the comedy and storytelling are both great, and it does so many interesting things with the characters. I don't even really have any major criticisms of the miniseries. Maybe if I had to nitpick, it would have been cool if Patience had a bigger role, but it's not that big a deal. Elements is still awesome either way. As for the rest of Season 9, there's only 6 other episodes, so it's kind of hard to figure out any sort of major trends or theming within them. The only thing I was able to find is that most of the episodes actually do connect back to Elements. Orb is the only episode that takes place before Elements, however it directly foreshadows the events of the miniseries. Abstract is a direct follow-up to Elements, showing how Jake is doing in his new alien form. Catch-up shows us what Marceline was doing right before Elements. And the last 2 episodes of the season, Whispers and 3 Buckets, show us Fern's degrading mental state after failing to protect Ew in Elements. The only real outlier amongst these episodes is Fiona and Cake and Fiona, both because it's not related to Elements in any way, and also because it's not very good. But the fact that Elements had such a strong impact on the rest of the series is actually another reason why it's my favorite miniseries. Stakes and Dylan's are definitely both important in providing closure for Marceline and Finn respectively, but I always wish they had a bit more of an impact on the show as a whole, instead of just feeling like side adventures. Outside of just a montage at the end at least. Elements on the other hand has a very strong impact on the rest of the series, and I love that. And its impact definitely extends into Season 10. Here is where I'd normally discuss the characters in Season 9, but the thing is, most of them I've either already talked about while discussing Elements, or I just don't have much to say about this season. So I'm going to make this part of the video very brief. Finn had a very strong role in Elements, as well as Whispers and 3 Buckets. Like I said in my Season 8 retrospective, I wish Fern's arc had at least 1 or 2 more episodes before he betrayed Finn, but that being said, he's still a very sympathetic character and makes for a very compelling antagonist. Jake had some great character moments in Orb, Cloudy, and Abstract, and I loved his dynamic with Finn in Elements. Aside from being the tower in Elements, PB gets literally nothing to do in Season 9, so I don't have anything to say about her. Ice King is easily the MVP of the season. His role in Elements is excellent, and despite the fact that I don't like Fiona and Cake and Fiona, some of the lines he gets in that episode make it better than it would be otherwise. Plus, just look at how bespoke he is. We stan. Aside from being candified in Elements, the only major role Marceline gets this season is in Ketchup, so I don't really have anything to say about her. BMO had a major role in Orb and Ketchup, as well as some pretty funny lines in Skyhooks and 3 Buckets, making this a pretty solid batch of episodes for him as a whole. So yeah, that's Season 9. Sorry about how short this video is, but like I said before, this was a pretty weird season to talk about. Though despite how short the season is, it's actually weirdly one of my favorites. I just love Elements that much, and most of the episodes outside of Elements are really strong too. With Fiona and Cake and Fiona being the only episode of the season that I actively dislike. But with that, please let me know how you guys feel about Season 9, and particularly the Elements miniseries, in the comments. I'll see you guys for the top 10 list, and Squill out.